Hey there, it's T again. You have no idea how long we've been waiting to drop this on you. This is the third time we filmed it, and our caloric banks can't handle this type of abuse any longer. So without further ado, I'm going to send it over to live action Brian with the butter.
We're going to cube up the butter before we get into making our actual biscuits. And pro tip, so you're not using plates or anything else that you'd end up dirtying and having to wash later. I keep the wrappers around, so when these are done being cubed, we're going to get them back onto this and pop them either back into the fridge or into the freezer for a couple minutes while we set up our dry ingredients. So I'm going to move those guys right off to the side for now. Now, it's going to actually be as easy as just cubing this up a little bit. You can go as fine as you want. I'll be honest, the more you handle it, the more it's going to melt, which is going to make it substantially more difficult to actually get these pieces to come apart later. So we're just gonna give them a little bit like this before we lay them down in a second. And let me move my hand so I can actually show you what's going on, or I'll give it the flip. So basically all my hand is doing was keeping the butter itself in a line so that we can run down and it's not gonna shift off too hard. So that you can just keep making those same even cuts and you just keep moving down the line. And then just, again, full transparency. I'm just gonna break it up a little bit now because it's already gonna start melting. You can even see it. You can actually even see it start melting on the package where it's super shiny in the light. That's just a little bit of melted butter, but it'll come back. And then just rinse, repeat, same deal. Once it's already through, because if you just try to move your knife, oh, never mind. I was gonna say, usually what ends up happening is I just keep this to try and keep it back in place, because it does like to stick to the knife. And then now that we have these 3 rows, I'm just gonna drop it, do the same exact thing. The finger is just holding the butter in place. Let's see if I'll show you on this one. So it's supposed to just be holding it in place, but you see how this guy wants to slide? We gotta move him back over. No big deal, nice and easy. And then last guy.
So we have a new cooking term for you. We're using the biscuit method here, and it should feel obvious why. I'll refer you to the title of the video. The biscuit method is a quick bread technique where you get solid fat as cold as possible and cut it into your dry ingredients. We cut the butter ahead of time and threw it into the freezer for maximum colds per square inch, and we need to keep the fat cold moving forward. The cold fat is necessary for creating as much steam as possible during the baking process, and if the fat melts too early, it will incorporate into the flour and leave you with a buttery and doughy urinal cake, and that's not as good as it sounds. The recipe calls for buttermilk, and we decided not to crowd my fridge with half a gallon of the stuff, so we're making our own. Take it away, alternate angle Brian.
So to make homemade buttermilk, you need, for every 1 cup of actual milk you use 1 tablespoon of white distilled vinegar. If you do any more, you're gonna notice that it's getting chonky. And that's not what we're aiming for here.
If you're anything like us, 1, I'm so sorry to hear that, and 2, you probably left your butter in the freezer for too long. It is now your duty to enlist every ounce of finger strength you have to bust up the butter pebbles into the flour, creating butter dust. You'll know you've reached the proper consistency when it begins feeling more like sand or cornmeal than it does flour. The time has come to pour that ice cold butt milk into the butter dust and start kneading. Using a fork at first, we're slowly incorporating the dry and wet to form a very shaggy dough. The less contact the dough has with your hands, the better, not only because I know where they've been, but also because they're too warm and will melt the butter. Minimal hand contact is key. Now let's watch him try to knead the dough with as little hand contact as possible. Mostly fingertips and gentle pressure. This is great technique. just continue lightly pressing, turning, and folding the dough. Then towards the end, give it something to remember you by. A few good presses. As long as the butter isn't melting and the dough isn't tearing, you've done a good job.
Alright, so what I'm gonna do here is I take just a couple little things, like a couple fingerfuls of flour, just rub it on the rolling pin, a little bit over the top, and then we're gonna start in the center, and we're just gonna try to push it out. And then when you start in the center again, roll it back to you. This is going to prevent it from really tearing as you go through this, and this is super useful basically in every application where you're going to be making something like this. This method is not the most common for biscuits, but this is very common for things like puff pastry. That's not what we're making today, but because I'm trying to get a bunch of individual layers of butter and stuff melted into these biscuits, we are going to give it the one book fold. So this is good enough for right now. And you're going to start from the top, folding towards the center. Fold towards the center. And then this guy's going to roll up. And where we see all these things, I'm going to put those pieces back. But now I'm going to get just a little bit of flour down to work on. I'm going to put that crease side down. And I'm just going to hit it one more time. Now, when we're done here, rolling it out, I'm not going to do that again. We're going to actually cut our biscuits out of whatever we're left with here. Now, also, these are your biscuits, not my biscuits at this point. So if you are a round biscuit person, shame on you, but you can punch them out. Just make sure that you dip your cutter into the flour each time it goes in, and don't twist, because what you're going to end up doing is crimping the edges, which is going to prevent it from rising and being a nice puffy biscuit. And if you serve unrisen, not puffy biscuits, shame on you. Shame on you. So now that we got this guy going, we're gonna come in with the bench scraper, and we're gonna portion them out. Let's start by splitting it in half. And then I'm just gonna slide this guy kind of out of the way for now. But I think if that's the case, we're just gonna split them in half. And then we're just gonna come down end up like this. This guy's extra. Got one oddly square one. Just because of that, I'm gonna hit this one at a funny angle.
I'm uncomfortable about the salty looking one.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you got this little guy here, which I'm just gonna add over to this guy to make him also try to be pretty, but he's not gonna be pretty. So he got candy curds too. All right, but now that we have these guys, we're gonna take these and we're gonna get those out onto a tray.
This step is fairly simple. You're going to place every biscuit on the tray far enough apart so they can expand without fusing with one another while they cook.
All we have in here is some Chef Mike melted butter, and we're just going to take it with the brush. And you could use a paper towel for this. We're bougie. We have the brush, so we're going to use it. And you're just going to go over the top with the melted butter on each of the biscuits.
What is Chef Mike melted butter?
It's butter that's been melted in the microwave. So now that we got the biscuits ready to go, shiny, these some is going in the oven.
Would this even be a Kenny's cook video without onions?
What a knife. Yeesh.
To switch things up, we're presenting dull knife versus onions this time, and we're gonna speed through this so we can go sharpen that thing. We're starting the sausage in a cold pan. As it starts heating up, the fat will begin rendering out without cooking the meat so fast that it begins to burn. We need to render out as much fat as possible so we'll have something to saute the onions in, as well as form our roux down the road. The sausage will eventually begin frying in its own fat, and that is as good as it sounds. Once the edges turn gray, brown, or black, depending on how long you've forgotten it on the stove, start flipping it. This will hopefully prevent burning, render out some additional fat, and allow the other side to get some warmth during these cold New England winters. You'll want to break up the brown meat into bite-sized bits before you bring in the onions. Once they've been added, allow everything to cook together to your desired shade of brown, at which point we'll be adding somewhere between 2 tablespoons and 1/4 cup of flour. This is essentially the opposite of the biscuit method. We want hot fat mixing with room temperature flour to create a paste that will stick to everything in the pan. We're going to choose a brown at random from this chart and cook the roux to that color. The lighter the color, the more it will thicken. The darker the color, the deeper the flavor. And we got Brian's Sicilian during the summer. Better luck next time, us. The liquids we're going to add are going to be actual milk and heavy whipping cream. The milk is there for the bulk of the liquid, and the cream is there for some additional richness. If we added only cream, we would end up with a 2 times the net worth of Elon Musk decadent gravy, and I don't think we would actually survive eating that. Because we have meat and onions in our roux, it's easiest if we gradually add the liquids in, a cup or so at first, then slowly add more once it's fully been incorporated. By the time we reach the cream, there shouldn't be any issues. We're going to drop in a few sprigs of fresh thyme, let it simmer, and allow the roux to do its thing. While that's happening, we're going to remove the biscuits from the oven and finish them with some butter. You can either paint it on again, or use the patent pending biscuit dip method like the real chefs that you are. Let's go ahead and sneak a peek at those layers. Well, god dang, they look pretty good. Here comes Brian's favorite part, the plating. We're arranging 3 biscuit halves in the center of the plate. Drowning them with our sausage gravy. Removing that covert thyme sprig to save someone's life. A little more gravy for good measure. Garnishing with a few thyme leaves. And there we have it. A little taste of the South up here in the frozen wastes. If you like what we're doing here, or you had a good time watching, please hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment, share this thing with everyone, and tell your mother to make this for you on Christmas morning. It really does help us out. But until next time, be good. Peace.